The Pharisees said, "Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it lawful to pay the census tax to Caesar or not?" Knowing their malice, Jesus said, "Why are you testing me, you hypocrites? Show me the coin that pays the census tax." They handed him the Roman coin. He said to them, "Whose image is this and whose inscription?" They replied, "Caesar's." At that he said to them, "Then repay to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God." Hello and welcome to Close Walk Catholic Communications. I'm Father Bayer, your host, and I have with me today my co-host, Father Joe Doyle, who you've heard in the past with different shows. This is a very special show and a very special format for us today. What we're doing, and as you all know, in the next week or so, we have our national election. We want to be very clear that this is not a show about any particular candidate. This is not a show about any particular party. This is a show about responsible citizenship. First of all, the need that everyone should vote. That's our responsibilities as Americans. We have generations of people who lived and died and fought for our freedoms, for a democracy. And we should never dishonor their memory by taking our right and our duty to vote casually. And, you know, when we talk about give to God what is God and give to Caesar's what is Caesar's, there was a time in our history, at least here in the U.S., that was no problem. Because as one nation under God, our laws were reflective of that. And so being faithful to your country and being faithful to your God was not anything in opposition to one another. What has happened is over recent decades, as we've moved away from the law of God and made the individual right the supreme ruler of everything, we have literally generations of young people who don't know the difference between legality and morality. And the difference in this country at this point in our history between legality and morality is unfortunately very real and unfortunately growing more separate through the times. And so we want to make sure that you understand that we're here to talk about how do we remain one nation under God's. No parties, no particular politicians, but we do believe policies are very, very important. You know, when all is said and done, give to God what is God's, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Ladies and gentlemen, when this life is over for us, we don't stand before the throne of the Supreme Court. We stand before the throne of God. We answer to God as to whether or not we've chosen Him or we've chosen a school of thought that's based on convenience and perhaps other things. Father Joe, welcome, and
thank you.
Take it off. Give me an educated perspective. I'm just talking.
No, you brought up some good points about our role as Catholic priests. We are teachers, and we teach theology. Philosophy's involved in it as well. And as you mentioned about the whole secular philosophy that is part of our civilization, especially here in the United States, we've become more and more secular. So when an election is on the horizon, we can contribute to the knowledge that I think our Catholic people need, and that's our role. Not to point out, as you say, any particular party or name any particular person, but rather to maybe educate, maybe re-educate, call people to a knowledge of what we believe as Catholics when it comes to making important decisions like an election.
One of the things that I think is very important, and I have a neighbor at the rectory, and he's been pretty standoffish. He works in his yard a lot, and I'll stop, say hello and everything, and he stopped me the other day. He said, "Hey," he said, "you got a minute?" I said, "Sure." He said, "It's kind of like a theological question. Is that okay if I said, sure." He said, "Well, look," he said, "I'm Christian." I didn't know. They don't go to church that I'm aware of. But anyway, he said, "I'm Christian." And he said, "I follow a lot of my customers and clients on Facebook." And he said, "I had one of my clients the other day saying that she's a Catholic for choice, that she was Catholic, but she chose, she believes that it's a woman's choice over the fact that it's a human life." And I said, "You know, years ago there was a group called Jews for Jesus." And I said, to me, that's the same thing. How do you say you're Jewish if you believe Jesus is the Son of God? How do you say you're Catholic when we can say the unborn is a matter of choice and it's not a gift from God? And there are a lot of discrepancies out here. And it all falls, in my mind, as limited as that might be, in my mind, it falls to the supremacy of the individual will. And Father Joe, you've talked in the past about conscience.
Yes.
And people mistakenly think conscience is a gut feeling. If I feel in my gut, or if I think it's okay, it's okay. And, you know, Father, talk about a properly formed conscience.
Yeah, I think that's the term. People say, well, I follow my conscience. But is your conscience properly formed? And what does that mean? Do you go back to look and see what the church teaches in a particular matter? That's how you form your conscience, knowing, first of all, that when you do go back, you're going to find certain principles that have been taught through the centuries by the church that we can't argue with. For example, thou shalt not kill. Well, everybody used to believe that that was a commandment to be followed by all human beings. And so we can't go against that in our conscience and say, my conscience tells me that it's all right to kill people if I don't like them or if they don't agree with me. No. Forming your conscience means to go back and study what the Bible says and what the church has been teaching for 2,000 years, and that will help you make the correct decision. There are some people who don't have what we call a correct conscience because they haven't bothered to form it. They operate on the feelings, as you say. That's not good enough.
You know, and it's interesting because I just read an article this week about Catholics and Christians that over 2/3 of them believe that fornication is acceptable behavior. I don't know if you saw the argument, but 2/3 of them believe fornication is acceptable. Well, let me tell you something. If I meet a 15-year-old girl who finds herself pregnant, she's scared to death, she's got all kinds of fears of family. I understand on a feeling level why that child would be scared to accept the responsibility of giving birth. You know, even if she gave it up for adoption, giving birth marks her as been there, done that, an easy mark. She puts out all the things that go into it, let alone all the other fear of ostracism, everything that goes with that. On a feeling level, I understand that. On a level of a properly formed conscience, I say, honey, it is a human life. And you can't deny that, even if you feel it's okay and you still want to go to cheerleading camp this summer, it's not okay. And it's that misunderstanding, that misrepresentation of what morality is. And, you know, and I'm going to go somewhere as Father Joe. And I believe that Humanae Vitae, wonderful document about the dignity and the sanctity of human life from the moment of conception to the moment of natural death, I think was a watershed event in our Catholic history. For those of you who are not familiar with it, and it goes back to my college days, that was the little things that said the Pope says the pill is a no-no. They took one aspect of that artificial contraception, and that was the birth control document. But it was a beautiful document about the dignity and the sanctity of human life. And even within the church, among clergy and religious, you had people teaching opinions and not teaching what the church taught. And in doing that, you had a very confused Catholic faithful. You had people who would go to their parish priest and ask about birth control, artificial. He'd say one thing. They didn't like what he said. They went to the next parish, and he said another thing. They went to the third parish, and he just left to marry the nun in the school, okay? It was this watershed event where, in my mind, the teaching authority of the church was so greatly damaged because now people thought it's dealer's choice. You can go pre-shopping and you can find all sorts of things. And if you look at things that have happened recently with priests, supposedly in good standing, you know, making their congregation do a pledge against being white, telling everyone that, you know, homosexual marriage is good and you're welcome in the church, and that, you know, all the laws of the church. And furthermore, Father, not having our leadership stand up and say, time out. That's not us. That's not who we are. I mean, I graduated magna cum laude everywhere I went, okay? They didn't ordain me because I was so bright. I was ordained to teach what the church teaches and not my opinion. And we have created a lot of the confusion we now see.
Unfortunately, yes. And once again, that gets back to the formation of one's conscience, because you're going to hear all kinds of opinions. That's the other thing. Everybody says, I'm entitled to my opinion. In a certain sense, you are. But if you're sick, what is your opinion over and against your doctors? The doctor spent years studying medicine. We haven't done that, so who are we to make a decision about our health? We go to the doctor. And so when it comes to decisions about who to vote for and why, then we need to form the conscience. And where do we find the information? We find it in the teachings of the church.
Absolutely. We're going to talk more about the responsibility of things that we need to prepare for as we prepare to vote. Stay with us. Father Joe and I'll be back in a moment. Hi, I'm Father Jeff Bae from Closer Walk Catholic Communications. Thank you for being here today, and a special thanks for the support that you give us. First of all, your prayerful support we so desperately need, and also your financial support. We are donor-driven, and that is what keeps us on the air today. As you well know, the truth is in great demand and in very short supply, and mainstream media is not going to bring you the truth of the Gospels of our Lord Jesus Christ, because that's not socially acceptable and it's not politically correct. Certainly we all realize that when this life journey's over, we don't stand before the Supreme Court, we stand before the throne of God. Therefore, with great clarity and great charity, to pronounce the truth of the gospel is important. Your prayers, your financial support enables us to do that. So we thank you, and may God bring you closer in your walk with the Lord each day. God bless you. Hello and welcome back to Close Walk Catholic Communications. I'm Father Bailly, the host, and my co-host, sometimes Father Joe Doyle, is here with me today. And this is a special show. It's out of character. Father Joe usually does catechesis. I usually follow the liturgical year. But prior to this upcoming election, we've decided that we need to talk about responsible citizenship. One of the things that I think is very important to understand, if some guy says, hey, my name's John Brown and I'm an atheist and I would like to be your governor, the public outroar would be, this guy's an atheist. We don't want him to be our governor as a professed atheist. Although atheism is getting a little bit more aggressive these days, we wouldn't vote based on that. But at the same time, we want people to be people of faith, but we don't want their faith to interfere in the way they govern in this so-called one nation under God. And that's a very real dilemma, because I guess it's maybe 20 years ago now. Who are you to impose your Eurocentric, Judeo-Christian opinions on all of us? Well, wait a minute. We're not a theocracy. The reason why this country was founded is that people would be free to worship God as they came to know him. So we're one nation under God. And you're free to be a Buddhist or Jewish or Catholic or any other Protestant denomination. You're free to start your own church. You're free to be Islamic. We have all those freedoms. And that's fine that we have all those freedoms. But we're still one nation under God. And so if we're one nation under God, how can we legislate and prepare things in our country that are contrary to the teachings of God? Not a Catholic God, not a Baptist or a Jewish God. Let's take the Ten Commandments and just go with that, okay? We're not trying to make everybody Catholic or Jewish or Muslim or Buddhist or whatever. We're trying to remain a nation under God. And as we said in the opening of this show, that used to be hand in hand with our government. It's now out of whack. Father Joe, take it from there.
Yeah, we've just lost so much. For example, the idea of the natural law. There are a lot of things coming up in this election that deal with issues springing from our belief in what the natural law says, the law written in a human person's heart. We believe the Ten Commandments, as you mentioned. But even without the Ten Commandments, do good and avoid evil. We have to deal with these issues before we vote. Is someone who is going into office going to do good or evil as it pertains to our lives individually, our lives as Catholics, and to other people's lives as well? That's a key issue. So we're dealing, as we should, I think, as Catholic priests, in offering direction for people who are confused. The direction of our country. That's a key issue also coming up in the election. In which direction are we going? So that'll go back to education and re-education as to different forms of government and how they have worked or failed in other countries. And just looking back on our own country, what has worked, what hasn't? Who makes promises and keeps them? Who doesn't? And we look at a person's record. I think our church is pretty good for that. Instead of telling people who to vote for by name, we'll say, okay, we'll give you their record. And here's the record for so-and-so, here's the record for another candidate. Now, you look at that and see what record conforms to what we believe as Catholics. I think that's a good approach, and hopefully that's what we're trying to do today.
It's not about personalities, it's about policies. It's about things that we hold very near and dear. I don't know if you realize it, but since the shutdown, there have been 46 attacks on Catholic churches. You know, for a society that worships sports stars and all forms and fashions, Hollywood, recording artists, and if anybody saw the MTV Awards program and didn't lose their groceries, you're better than I, Gunga Din, okay? I mean, they idolize, but having a statue of Mary, the mother of Jesus, is going to be beheaded and called an idol. And you got, it 46 churches where they've either attempted to set fire, they've desecrated, they've thrown out the tabernacle, they've desecrated statues. Then, when we saw in one of these peaceful protests with grandmothers and veterans, as they're called, and they're burning the Bible, and they're burning the American flag. I love what Cardinal Dolan from New York said. He said, I've got a lot of Jewish friends, and they told me, look, when they attack your churches and burn your books and set your churches on fire, you better pay attention because you're next. And that's really what's happened. So, Father, I want to talk about individual issues. The dignity and the sanctity of every human life. Does one group's lives matter over the other? All lives matter, especially the unborn. And for those of you who I expected, they're Catholic priests, they're giving that abortion thing. That's only one issue. Baby, if you're the one who's being aborted, there's no second issue. Okay? There is not a second issue for the fetus who's thrown into a garbage can. The dignity and the sanctity of human life, and especially with the well-being of our elderly, who seemed to be prime targets for this virus, as they were allowing people to keep going into the vulnerable population with the infected and with the virus. You know, so it's all human life. It's human trafficking. It's those victims. You know, it's a disenfranchised. It's all those people. Excuse me, I get excited and I start coughing. Give me a minute. The dignity and the sanctity of all human life, and that goes well past the unborn. Well past the unborn. Every life should be treated with dignity and sanctity. Even people who live in alternate lifestyles and non-recognized marriages by the church, even people who choose to live in a different gender than what God created them, they deserve respect, they deserve dignity, but we don't need to say that's got to be the norm. Right. And you've got to embrace this and, you know, and change everything you do because this group has decided they want that. For the religious liberties, you know, I don't know if you saw this thing that they decided for cost-cutting measures, they were going to remove all Catholic chaplains from military naval bases. Really? Now, what's that all about? They came back and got a lot of pressure, but they were going to remove all Catholic chaplains from naval bases to say you had to go into town and not on the base. Other issues for this. We've only got about 3 minutes, Father. Take it. I don't shut up when I get started.
No, life is the key issue, but it's not the only one. I suppose there are things that come under the title of life. For example, the lives of people who choose to emigrate for good reason. and want to live in this country that can give them opportunities. We're in favor of that. But there have to be rules and regulations. Once again, it's a matter of law and order, a term that some people don't like. But our God is an orderly God. And our God
Who gives us the law.
Who gives us the law, and that's how we live as human beings. So there's so many different issues. Financial, yes, that's a big problem now in the light of coronavirus and other problems, natural disasters from all over. So a lot of it's going to come down to a basic trust in God's loving providence for us, but we can only speak for ourselves as Catholics. We can't direct someone who's not Catholic to believe what we do about God's love for us. We can be good examples, as we've had through the centuries in our Catholic faith. And that's what we hold up, I think, for people who are trying to make a good decision on this, as some people say, the most important election that we've ever been faced with in our country. I believe that. And I think it's because of the direction that we will go in. And it's going to go into the direction of truth and goodness, or it's going to go in the other direction. So we have to be prayerful as we approach this election.
And you know, the other thing, and this is a last parting shot, and it is a shot, it's intended to be a shot, to people who are elected officials to serve a city, uphold the laws and the Constitution of your state and your city, who have given solace and support to people who, in the name of a peaceful protest, have burned down and destroyed those cities. I hope and pray to God that that person is never elected to another position in their life. If I want you to be mayor of my city, I want you to protect my city. I don't want you to side with the people who come in and destroy it and loot it and burn it and say they have a valid protest. We do have a valid right to protest. We do not have a right to destroy what other people have worked for all their lives just because we feel we have that right. So I agree with Father Joe. It's a big election. It's very important. First of all, vote. Please vote. But when you do, please, God, make sure you choose the candidates that keep us one nation under God and not someone else's opinion. Thanks for being with us. God bless you.